July has come to an end, so it's time for a recap of what I fed George and Eleanor this month. As always, I'm not a vet and I'm not a feline nutritionist, so this is not professional advice. I'm just a girl trying to feed her cats the best she can with the budget she's got. And these are my two cats, Sir George and Lady Eleanor. They are both 2-year-old ragdolls that have been neutered and spayed, and they weigh between 13 and 14 pounds. Based on their body condition and activity levels, I aim for around 300 calories per day that I split into 3 meals and sometimes a little snack. You'll see a huge aspect of my cat's diet and feeding routine is a food rotation. So I feed 3 different meals per day, and then each month I change everything up and choose 3 entirely new foods. So let's get into this month's selections. As a heads up, with each food, I'll be giving some nutritional info, as well as George and Eleanor's taste rating on a scale of 0 to 5 paws. My cats are pretty picky, so don't be surprised that there are very, very few 5-paw foods. For our first meal of the day, we're starting strong with Fancy Feast, a brand that George and Eleanor usually really enjoy. This is the chopped grill feast flavor, which is their chicken pate that doesn't contain any fish. George and Eleanor each get 1 3-ounce can. The first meal of the day is always our most complicated because I add in their probiotics and any additional supplements they might be on. The probiotics I've been using these days are Love Bugs from Adored Beast Apothecary. My vet's recommended probiotics for both my cats, and this is a brand I like because of the multiple probiotic strains in their formula and the high CFUs. I think using probiotics has helped with our many food transitions and is something I think is worth looking into if your cats have indigestion issues. On top, I'm crumbling some freeze-dried chicken just to make sure George and Eleanor finish their entire meal since it has the probiotics in it. These are from PureBites. I actually buy the jumbo bag that's meant for dogs because it's a better value than the small cat bags. With most single ingredient treats like this, it's usually fine to buy the dog version because it's the exact same product in different packaging. As a whole, I really like a lot of the Fancy Feast patés. I aim for a high protein, moderate fat, and low carbohydrate diet for my cats, so the macro distribution on this pate meets my goals with over 45% protein on a dry matter basis and under 10% carbs. The protein comes from animal sources, which is ideal because as obligate carnivores, cats require an animal-based diet to adequately nourish them. Oftentimes at this price point, I see protein being bumped up with wheat, gluten, alfalfa meal, or other plant-based products, and I'd much rather have my cats get their protein from chicken, beef, duck, organ meats, and so on. Anyway, I chose this specific flavor because it doesn't contain any fish, which is something I try to avoid in my cat's food. Although a lot of Fancy Feast patés meet my nutritional goals, many of them have fish listed as the 4th or 5th ingredient, and this one is fish-free, which gets a thumbs up from me. I like how readily available Fancy Feast is. It's so easy to find in pet stores, grocery stores, pharmacies if you're in my city, and my cats love most of the flavors. But the biggest selling point for me is the price. This is a budget-friendly option for people looking to feed wet food with a good nutritional profile. Now, some of the ingredients may not be the highest quality. There are unnamed meat byproducts, unnamed liver, and artificial flavors. And while those aren't necessarily bad things, the way these ingredients are labeled typically indicates they're of lower quality. For me, it's a trade-off I make because of my budget, and I'm comfortable feeding these ingredients because I balance them out with other foods throughout the day. That's the beauty of a food rotation. You can minimize overexposure to ingredients you don't like and can customize a diverse menu that works for your budget. As far as George and Eleanor's flavor ratings, for some reason, this specific pate doesn't hit quite the same as the others in this Fancy Feast line. They like it, they'll almost always finish it without a topper, but I don't get that same gusto I get with the other Fancy Feast foods we've tried. Meal 2 of the day, we have Weruva. This is the paw lickin chicken from their classic line. George and Eleanor split the 5.5-ounce can. This is a great food if your cats are into a gravy consistency or shredded textures. Eleanor is a little finicky with shreds, so I have to break up the chunks a bit for her and add a freeze-dried chicken topper again. Now, George loves the food and doesn't need a topper. I mean, he's been trying to sneak in bites this whole time. But if I only give the topper to Eleanor, George gets upset and tries to eat her food. That's life with 2 cats for you. So, George gets some too. A lot of minced and shredded foods with gravy have a higher percentage of carbs to get that gravy texture, but this flavor from Weruva has around 4% carbs on a dry matter basis and protein at 77%, which is outstanding. I really like how transparent Weruva is with their ingredients and the nutrition data that's available on their website. As far as pricing goes, I'd say it's moderately priced for a wet food. The only thing that's not ideal for my cat specifically is that it's not as calorie dense as many other foods I feed. So for example, their first meal today was around 100 calories. This meal is around 55 calories for almost the same volume of food. So to meet their calorie requirements, I'd need to feed a greater volume or add in a snack during their day. My cats just don't have the stomach capacity or drive to eat 5.5 ounces of food in one sitting, so sometimes getting in those more calorie-dense, smaller meals makes life easier on all of us. Not to mention, having to eat twice as much of this food for the same calorie value kind of negates the moderate pricing if I need to buy twice as much. That said, if your cat is smaller than mine and doesn't require as many calories, or if they're on a diet and need to shed a few pounds, it's a brilliant option. So we're moving on to their snack. I guess it's actually a meal, but I'm so conditioned as a human to think anything outside of 3 meals per day is a snack. I've got the Ziwi Peak air-dried cat food in the lamb flavor, and today I'm placing it in these Nina Ottison treat puzzles. I'm making George and Eleanor work for it today. I've tried a bunch of the Ziwi Peak air-dried foods. This lamb one doesn't seem to be as big of a hit with my cats as the venison and chicken flavors, but it still gets the seal of approval. As far as dry foods go, this air-dried line, not to be confused with Ziwi Peak's new steam-dried line, which has a very different nutritional profile, but this air-dried line is one of my favorites because it's pretty much just made of animal products and added minerals, and seems to have high-quality ingredients. It's low in carbs for a dry food, which is great for our obligate carnivore kitties. That said, it's pretty expensive and wouldn't be something I could afford to feed exclusively. It also lacks the moisture that I think is so important in a cat's diet. A lot of indoor cats are prone to health issues like urinary tract blockages, diabetes, obesity, and feeding a moisture-rich diet with a good nutritional profile can decrease the risk of some of these issues occurring, and it's just harder to get that good macro distribution and moisture levels in with dry food. Our final meal of the day is Tiki Cat After Dark rabbit and chicken liver soft pate. So this is actually an example of another reason I love a food rotation. My cats really enjoy some of these after dark patés, but there were sourcing issues for this line, and it ended up being out of stock for almost a year. So I'm glad my cats were used to eating other foods while we waited for them to come back. Both cats get one 3-ounce can. Funnily enough, even though this is called the rabbit and chicken liver pate, the second ingredient here is duck. So it just goes to show that the name on the label doesn't always reflect what's inside, and you gotta read those ingredients. So I have some mixed feelings about this food. I think I used to love it more before it got reformulated and before I really dove into the world of cat nutrition. But let's just start with the things I love. The first ingredients, you've got rabbit and duck, which are unique proteins, and then you get organ meats like chicken heart, which adds some diversity to their nutrition. I like Tiki Cat as a brand. I think they have a really interesting lineup of wet foods, and I'm into the whole concept behind their After Dark lines that are super low carb, with a good amount of protein and interesting organ meats. Eleanor really enjoys this food, and although nutrition is important to me, it brings me a lot of joy to see my cats loving their food. I want them to be happy. It makes me happy to see them happy. But there are some things I just don't love. It's a touch higher in fat than I would like to see in a food. Cats typically do well on a diet with moderate fat, so I like to keep the fat below 40% on a dry matter basis, and this is already a really generous number and what many people would consider to be quite high. This food is just a touch over 40% fat and therefore above my usual threshold. The second thing I'm not crazy about is the amount of gum in the food. I don't think gums are bad. They're often necessary. They bind ingredients together, they help with texture, but this recipe has 3 different kinds of gums, which is kind of on the high side because I feel like I see a lot of recipes with maybe 1 or 2 gums and thickeners. Sometimes too much gum or specific types of gums can lead to digestion issues and overly soft stool, which is a problem I already have with George sometimes, so this food might not be the best for him. Third thing I don't love is something I don't usually get into much here, but it's the calcium to phosphorus ratio of this food. Neither of my cats have kidney disease, so I don't focus heavily on feeding a low phosphorus diet or a kidney-friendly diet, and I'm no expert on the subject. But I do like to take a glance at foods when that nutrition data is available just to make sure that they're not excessively high in certain minerals and that it looks balanced. There is some evidence to suggest diets high in phosphorus in combination with a low calcium to phosphorus ratio can accelerate kidney disease progression in cats. So while this food doesn't exceed any phosphorus limits, I am just a little curious as to why the calcium to phosphorus ratio is low. Again, Evidence shows that this ratio becomes an issue when it is in conjunction with a high phosphorus diet, so this may be totally irrelevant. But it brings me to my next point, which is that this food is expensive. I'm just so much more picky and critical of a food when I'm paying more for it. When I buy an expensive food, I want it to cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and be immensely loved by my cats. So why did I buy this food again despite all this? I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but I think I just get sucked in by the fact that it's a rabbit pate. There's something that makes me feel like my cats are getting an elite food or the best of the best because I'm feeding them this special protein. Yes, there is value and variety. Yes, it's fun for cats to try new flavors, but as far as I know, rabbit isn't a better protein than, say, chicken or beef. It's just different. I've absolutely been influenced by this rarity mindset and my desire to give my cats opportunities to eat like royalty. So this is some sort of bias I need to unpack, I'm aware. But to sum it up on this food, it's not one I'll frequently feed, but it's fun to throw into a rotation every now and then for my cat's enjoyment. So that's it for this month. We'll have a whole new food rotation next month, so stick around. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you.